So I was asked to talk about microaggressions, and I thought that the best way to kind of go about this is to sort of talk about using humor to kind of push back, to sort of save your sanity, to have some fun. So this is kind of the presentation. There's going to be some videos, cartoons. I hope you guys enjoy it. I will say, however, that because of the topic, I use a lot of profanity, dark humor, that sort of thing. So if you're easily offended, I recommend knowing that ahead of time. So this is Molly Ivins. She's from Texas, like myself, and one of my icons, my idols. She had this quote that I thought was really great, and I would kick it off with this. The thing is, you gotta have fun while you're fighting for freedom, because you don't always win. And one of the best examples she ever had of having fun while you're fighting for freedom, she tells this story about Austin, Texas. A recent Ku Klux Klan rally in Austin produced an eccentric counter-demonstration. When the 50 Klansmen appeared, they were busting from Waco. She's very clear about this. As a fellow former Austinite, we do not want anyone to think that they come from us. In front of the state capitol, they were greeted by 5,000 locals who had turned out for a Moon the Klan rally. Citizens dropped trowel both singly and in groups, occasionally producing a splendid wave effect. It was a swell move. So this is sort of the spirit that I kind of do my work in, and I think that there's a lot of value to it. I will talk a little bit about other strategies, but this will be my focus, sort of mooning people that I don't agree with. And one of the reasons is I think that when you're doing this work with feminism, social justice, any of this kind of thing, you can get burned out very easily. It's frustrating. You feel powerless. I think a lot of the time we work so hard and we get so little in return, and it just seems like change is glacial, and I think that can sometimes make you think change is not happening at all. So that can be really frustrating. I think it's overwhelming. I definitely know, especially in this day and age of the internet, when you can just sort of see all the hate and abuse that people sort of dish out in just streams of bile, you begin to wonder if everybody on the planet is just a dick, or like, you feel kind of alone. And, I think you begin to fear that things are never going to get better, and it can cause a lot of despair. I've seen so many people just burn out in this line of work. And I think that sometimes it's inevitable. I think that kind of depends on the person. Some people have mental health issues, some people stress out easily, but I do think that you can use humor as sort of a weapon to sort of shield yourself from burning out like this, or like this little girl here. And I think one of the reasons that people burn out so easily is that we just feel like when we're talking to people about racism, sexism, homophobia, and things like that, we just feel like we're speaking to a brick wall a lot of the time. Nobody thinks that they're a racist or a sexist or a homophobe, and yet they say horrible things all the time. And when you confront them, they do this number. And I think we have to kind of understand why people, when you reason with them and you show them evidence and you try to really kind of approach things from a reasonable point of view, the reason that they won't listen to it is that that's just not how the human mind works. Most people decide what they feel and then come up with reasons for it. This has been shown by psychological research over and over again. It's called rationalizing. So most people just have a prejudice and then they come up with reasons for why they have that prejudice. So they're, sexist and they think women are lesser, but then they come up with a bunch of reasons like, evolution made them that way, or God made them that way, or whatever their excuse is. But, or I don't think that they're less than, I just think they're separate but equal, or whatever their excuse is. That's rationalization. They're not coming from a rational place, so it's very difficult to rationalize with them. And the other thing I think is that a lot of people, when you come at them and you try to sort of criticize their attitudes about these sorts of isms, they just freak out right away and think, you're calling me a sexist, you're calling me a racist, you're calling me these names, and I think that just sort of shuts down the brain in a lot of ways. So it's very difficult to rationalize with people. or not rationalize, to ration with people. It's very easy for people to rationalize. And then on the flip side of it, I think another reason people get really frustrated is that I think on most of us, when we see kind of injustice in the world, especially those little slights, little injustices, and I'll get to talking about that in a minute, we don't really feel like we can speak up against it. One of the reasons is we're often told from a young age that if we ignore bullies, they'll go away. Another reason is that we're afraid of being labeled humorless or oversensitive. And, you know, the opposition is tiresome. So I'm going to kind of go through these reasons as to why they shouldn't keep you from speaking up. The first one is, you always hear this, and I hear this, I swear to God, on a daily basis. Ignoring bullies will make them go away. You know, people are bothering you, they're saying prejudiced things. If you just ignore them, they'll go away. And the reason that this is not true is that bullies, people, particularly when you're talking about, like, you know, sexism and other things like that, they often feel that they are the ones that have society behind them. They're the ones who are like, I'm speaking up for the silent majority. Everyone, you know, everyone agrees with me in email. You definitely get this. If you want to see this sort of attitude, just like flip on like Fox News one night, and you'll just sort of see like all these angry old white dudes. In fact, I think there was a lot of that recently. You saw a lot of outpouring on Fox News of a lot of older white men sort of not grasping that they may not actually speak for the majority in this country anymore, and they're just startled by that, because I think they very much sincerely do. So, you know, ignoring bullies just sort of satisfies their feeling that they are the ones who are in the right, and they are the ones who have all the social support behind them. I think another thing that causes a lot of people to not speak up when they see injustice or feel like they've been offended is that a lot of the time people who are saying offensive, prejudiced things will just sort of toe the line. They'll say as much as they feel they can get away with without being called out on it, which I'll get back to. And that way, if you object to it, if you say that's offensive or I disagree or whatever, you are now in the position of being told that you can't take a joke or that you're a drama queen or that you enjoy being offended. I'm sure many of you have heard these kind of things coming at you. This, by the way, is a 19th century painting called The Irritating Gentleman. I'm not kidding, that's actually the name of it. So, I'm sure you guys have, for those who have been to the previous speech about microaggressions, kind of went over this, but this is sort of my definition of a microaggression. A microaggression is like when people say kind of small little things that are just sort of build up over time that are kind of offensive and prejudiced and bigoted. And I think what makes them micro is the plausible deniability. In fact, I think that's kind of most of what it is. It's this ability to sort of say something that sort of falls short of the line of just coming out and saying something sexist. It's usually, in some of the cases, it's actually just sort of invoked in their attitudes, like, you know, men sort of assuming women don't know things, or various things like that. And I went to the site that collects microaggressions and found some of them that people had, and since this is about sexism, I kind of focused on that. So, you know, as you can see here, these are often sorts of things that people will say to women, men especially will say to women, that aren't like straight up telling you that they think you're less than, or they're saying something overtly misogynist, but you kind of feel offended all the same because they're still assuming that you are weak or stupid or girly, or they're implying some stereotype, unfair stereotype to you. So, I like to consider sexual harassment, especially a lot of forms of sexual harassment, a kind of microaggression, because while there's like the obvious sexual harassment that we all know about, like guys groping women in public places without consent and things like that, most of it is actually kind of doing this towing the line behavior, where you're just seeing how much you can get away with without it being too obvious. So a lot of the time it will be disguised as flirting, even though flirting, I think, requires consent. So if the object of the flirting doesn't enjoy it and tries to escape and you continue to persist and flirt with her, I think that, that's a kind of sexual harassment. Making jokes that are meant to offend, but towing the line a little bit. And one of my favorites, of course, is a lot of the time when men are sexually harassing women and they get called out on it, they will often sort of play it off as like, I didn't know that I shouldn't be standing like right behind her. I'm just socially awkward. So again, these are sort of like the plausible deniability, I think, here is what really makes a microaggression. I think that one of the things that you need to understand when somebody is offending you or upsetting you with their prejudice stuff is that you do have rights, not like legal rights, I mean just sort of ethical, moral rights here. You have a right to be offended, you have a right to minimize your exposure to frustrating people, and it's okay to laugh about it. I think a lot of the times we feel that we don't have any of these rights. I think particularly women feel that if somebody says something sexist to us, we're supposed to like laugh it off and just pretend that it didn't happen. And those are people starting the Bastille, by the way. You do, in fact, have a right to be offended. And I think it's okay to trust yourself. If you feel that somebody is being sexist to you, you don't have to like double, triple, quadruple question whether or not that's just truly deeply what it is. It's a lot like what Jay was saying, is like, you don't have to like search deep down in their soul. You can kind of deal with the thing that has happened. And I think a lot of the time it's good to sort of, I obviously don't want to run around just pointing fingers and accusing people of sexism left and right. But I do think a lot of the time it's okay to sort of trust your instincts and at least follow that to see where it goes. Don't just shut it down right away. And I think that it's important to understand that you are not obligated to prove it every time you feel somebody's been sexist to you. If somebody feels like they're being sexist to you, you may not, if you can't prove it, you may not want to have that discussion right then and there. But I think you can go ahead and file that away and remember that feeling and call back to it should the occasion arise. And I think it's important to remember that prejudices aren't some myth, If somebody says something to you you think is sexist and you're just like, oh gosh, am I being oversensitive? I think it's really important to remember some people out there really are sexist and they really do say sexist things. In fact, a lot of people, I would actually argue most of us have sexist beliefs that are unexamined, that we just haven't scrubbed out of our brain. And even those of us who try really hard to scrub sexist beliefs out of our brain sometimes fail. So, a lot of the time when you feel like somebody said something sexist to you, it's because people say sexist things all damn day. It's okay. You're not being crazy, you're not being oversensitive most of the time. I've seen it, but it is rare. You have a right to minimize exposure. This was a big lesson for me. I went through a huge process of thinking that I had to put up with every slime bag, bully, bigot that came at me. I thought I had to argue down every person that ever wanted to pick a fight with me about the things I believe in. And I began to realize that this is a complete waste of time. You're not going to change their minds. I enjoy arguing with them sometimes, I won't lie. If any of you follow me on Twitter, you'll see this. But, sometimes I think that the sort of block function on Twitter, the ban function on blogs, and the I'm deleting you from my friends list on Facebook, and I'm not going to return your phone calls because you annoy me method is okay. You don't have to have every conversation with every person who's not going to be convinced coming at you. Especially, as I noted before, most people that have these beliefs are not going to be convinced in one conversation, or two, or even 10. So it's okay to let yourself not have those conversations if they're stressing you out. And I think it's important to realize you can laugh about it even over salads. Salads are funny. They're not real food. I say this as someone I was out early, just kidding. I think a lot of the time, I see a lot of people that, especially, when they're first getting started in sort of social justice, feminism, these sorts of things, they begin to feel like this is such a serious issue and we can't ever make jokes about it. And that is the quickest way to burn out. Like, that is absolutely the quickest way to burn out. A lot of the time, humor comes from the darkest corners of the world and the ugliest things we can talk about. And I think that it's okay to laugh about these things, especially if you're coming at it from laughing from the right point of view, which we will get into in a second. Humor is also incredibly effective. It gets you out of the humorless argument. I love this one. So when I started blogging and writing about feminism, I just would have guys come at me all the time saying, "Oh, you feminists are so humorless," and I basically joked them to death. Like, no one ever says that about me anymore. When you write a couple books that are written, are advertised as humor books, that one's pretty hard to pass off. More importantly, I think it exposes absurdities and contradictions, and I'm sure all of you are fans of The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert, so you can kind of see how they play this game every day. And interestingly, it's very difficult to argue with people, it's very difficult to argue with evidence and rational arguments with people. It's much easier sometimes to make jokes that expose these absurdities because now you're appealing to somebody on an emotional level where almost all persuasion actually happens. So it's very important to be funny if you can. Now, humor doesn't always work. You don't really want to point and laugh at your boss or your underlings or anybody that you have a sort of power differential relationship with. Touchy people sometimes don't like it when you make fun of them. In general, just the pointing and laughing kind of humor, you should be very, very careful about when you use that. I'm not saying don't use it, I enjoy it, but be a little bit careful about that. Sometimes it's hard to think on your feet. I think it's a little bit easier nowadays as more and more of these actions happen online, so you can take a moment, think about what you're going to do. In person, it can be a lot harder. And if it's bullying, I think that you're kind of missing the point. Like, the whole point of this is to reduce the amount of bullying in our society. But humor works a lot of times. These women do not have salads. I'm very sad about that. Social situations with family and equals. I particularly like to make fun of my family members. They are conservative Republicans. I give them a lot of help to their faces. Online, I think a lot of the time there's a community online where people are kind of tossing jokes back and forth, and there's a little bit more of a rough and tumble attitude. Most importantly, I think it's to make connections to others who feel the same way that you do about these issues. And we can all feel very alone, and sometimes being funny and having a joke can get us to feel more together. And just for yourself, I swear to God, I like to sit around and just read funny stuff and just cackle to myself like a witch. It's a lot of fun. I convince myself that the cat's there makes it less so. These are kind of a couple of very simple techniques when you're having in-face interactions with somebody who's being offensive that I have used and find to be pretty effective. You can pull the faux naive act. You just keep asking them to explain what they meant. This works really well if somebody makes a racist or sexist joke. Just be like, "I don't get it. Why is that funny?" And then just keep asking that until they basically come out and say, "Look, women can't drive, all right, because women are stupid." And then you win. Because you've caused them to cross the line. I enjoy the "I have a friend" act. I do this one to my family a lot, and a lot of other people when they're being prejudiced to me. I just go all wide-eyed. I go, "I don't know. I have a lot of friends in Group X, and they're nothing like you're saying." And then just act very sad. And you're entertaining yourself. They're not so entertaining. And feigning deafness. This one's really good for me because I am deaf. So literally making them just say, huh, until they stupid.